Vice President Kamala Harris finally made a trip down across the border. Didn't go to the border, but went across the border down into Guatemala because, as we know, in the United States, we've been dealing with an immigration problem for some time. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people every month who are coming up from the southern border, up through the southern hemisphere, up to our southern border in the United States because they want the American dream. They want to be a part of what we have here in our country, which is a pretty great thing. So I don't blame them for that. But there's been this recent surge, and it seems like something happened that caused this surge. If you recall, there was something important that happened back in January of this year where we changed administrations, went from one presidency to another. Donald Trump was not here anymore. Now Joe Biden comes into power. And suddenly, the border turns into this massive problem. Now we have hundreds of thousands of people coming across. Remember, we went through this. We already played this game back during the Trump administration, and the media was hyperventilating over this for a very long time. Kids in cages. AOC went down to the border and was crying, hanging from the chain link fence. Very dramatic. This big, gigantic problem. Donald Trump was a racist. This was the biggest catastrophe in the history of America for, that week or whatever, that 6 months or however long this went on. And everybody was crying foul. Well, now, the problem has magnified. It's amplified several fold over. And suddenly people are pretty quiet about it. Joe Biden, some time ago, back in March of this year, said, hey, this is looking like a problem because we were seeing major spikes in the numbers. And we've talked about this here. And I have a lot of empathy for the people who want to come here and be a part of America. To pick your family up and trek, thousands of miles across the desert. That's a big thing. That's a big deal. And I have a lot of empathy for those people. And my position on this has always been that I think it's reprehensible that our government creates policies that creates incentives for people to do that, to subject themselves, dragging their family across the desert. Who knows how many people, actually make it here, whether we have any accurate death numbers or, rape or sexual assault numbers or, kidnappings or abductions during the journey. Any idea what those numbers are? Nobody has any idea. And they all come to the border. People are dropping dead. They're being abused by other people. It's a humanitarian crisis, no doubt about it. And why is it exacerbating? Why is this sort of something that is escalating? Well, it happened because we saw a change in administration policy. And so Joe Biden back in March now starts to recognize this is going to be a big problem. We start seeing the numbers spike in March, and we know historically speaking, because we can look at the numbers from prior summers, that the March is just the start of it. Things get really bad April, May, June, and leading into July because it starts to sort of cool off, and people, as summer comes down upon us, people start the journey back in April and May when it starts to warm up down here in Arizona. So it's something that has been going on for a long time. Joe Biden says, Kamala, you're the only person who can help us solve this problem. I trust you. I know that you're competent and capable of solving this. You handle this because I don't want to do it. Lord knows nobody else can fix it. So he gives this pile of debris right over to Kamala, and people for a long time have been asking themselves, is she going to go to the border? Is she going to go and actually solve this thing? Because no party in America has been able to do it. No politician's been able to do it. We've had Republicans try, Democrats try, and it's just a big mess. So we've all been scratching our heads saying, well, what's Kamala going to do about this? Maybe she'll finally go down there. Has not gone down to the border, doesn't want to go down and see what's actually happening in Texas or Arizona or New Mexico or California, where the actual crisis is, where people are at, where the interface is between the two countries, right? It's called a border. On one side, we have America. On the other side, we have Mexico. So you would think that where we have this interface where one country merges with another country and people are coming across that border, that you would go and address that. You would go and say, hey, what's going on here? Hey, Texas Border Patrol, what do you guys need from me? I'm the vice president. I've been put in charge of this thing. I want to come solve this issue. What do you need? Go down to El Paso and different places here. We've got all sorts of places in Arizona where she can come down and just give an assessment of the situation and just show Border Patrol and law enforcement, the people who have their entire careers dedicated to protecting the border, that there's a little bit of enthusiasm, that she is here and she's dedicating the resources of the federal government to support these people as they do their job. But she doesn't do that, doesn't want to go to the border. She goes right over the border, lands in Guatemala. And if you look at a map, by the way, I didn't pull one on the slides, but if you do, you're going to notice that Guatemala is pretty far away from that border because Mexico is a big, giant country. And there's a lot of land in between Guatemala and the United States. And so Okay, so she just skips over kind of a big chunk of area where maybe a lot of people have to go through in order to get across the border. She just kind of skips that, goes right to Guatemala and says, oh, we're going to start addressing the issues that you have here. And how condescending is this, by the way? If you're a Guatemalan and Kamala Harris, you have somebody who comes in and says, hey, we have a problem in America. Our borders or we have immigration problems. We don't really know what we're doing there. We're going to solve this. You have Kamala, who's going to fly into your country, Guatemala, and say, you people are the problem. I'm going to come here. You guys have corruption and drugs and all this stuff. And I'm going to show you what we expect from you to solve our problem. I'm going to come in and we're going to start just, cleaning house. And you're welcome, Guatemala, for Kamala Harris coming in and telling you how to get your house in order to solve our problem. Right, if you're Guatemala, what are you saying to yourselves? Going, what? There's an entire country that's way bigger than us directly north of us. Has anybody spoken to them about this? They have control, theoretically, of the entire border that interfaces with the United States. Why are you hearing Guatemala talking to us about this? Go up to the country up there and talk to them. They control the border, not us. So, I am not a Guatemalan, but I imagine that if I were, I would not be very appreciative of Queen Kamala coming in and telling us how to run our business. And by the way, they weren't happy. So from the New York Post, what we see here is the Guatemala president blames Biden for the border crisis as protesters tell Kamala Trump won. All right. Now they said that. OK, I didn't say that, YouTube. That's the Guatemalans. They're not happy about whatever. That's their language, not mine. The Guatemalans say Trump won. Vice President Kamala Harris was greeted on Monday by protesters in Guatemala, telling her Trump won and, quote, go home. And I've got pictures of this here in a minute. As the country's president blamed Biden for this year's migrant crisis. The rally was visible to Harris's motorcade as she arrived to meet with Guatemala President Alejandro Giammattei one day after he blamed the U.S. for luring his constituents north. Right. And, I don't blame the guy. Right. The president is saying, hey, U.S., stop telling people that they can come to your country because they're going to come to your country. You're taking my constituents, he says. I need them. They're voters. And then there's another sign. There's a large sign that was near the Central American country's presidential palace here. And it says, Kamala, Trump won. The Guatemalans said that, YouTube. The Guatemalans. Cancel them, not me. Kamala, mind your own business, they said in another sign. Another sign said, according to a pool report. Well, there's a picture. I got a picture. Images posted to Twitter show other signs, including one that tells Biden's migration czar, Kamala, go home. Another large sign set up by activists features a doctored photo of a pregnant Harris. Oh my gosh, they are getting intense. The poster read, Guatemala is pro-life. And it says, Mamala, help me. These Guatemalans are amazing. They say, Mamala, help me, right? It's an anti-abortion sign. Guatemala is pro-life. Mamala, help me. Harris does not have biological children. Another sign that appears to have been hoisted by activists onto a tall building along the road says, Kamala, stop funding criminals, fuera de Guatemala, which is get out of Guatemala. It's unclear how many participants were involved in the protest. Giammattei said that CBS News interviewed that aired on Sunday said the Biden administration is to blame for sparking the migration crisis. The Guatemalan president said he and Harris, quote, are not on the same side of the coin on migration. Says he said, quote, we asked the United States government to send more of a clear message to prevent more people from leaving. When Biden took office, the message changed too. We're going to reunite families. We're going to reunite children, he said. The very next day, the Coyotes were here organizing groups of children to take them to the United States. You're kidding me. You don't say that. When the government comes out and says that policies are going to change, then would you be surprised that it actually creates incentives because people listen to what the government says? And then they do it. How about that? Shocking. Now, a day after the meetings, after a day of meetings, Harris is going to depart Guatemala Monday evening, so she's already gone. She left yesterday, traveled to Mexico. She's going to hold meetings on Tuesday today with the president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. Now, former President Donald Trump made curbing illegal immigration and stopping asylum-seeking caravans from Central America major themes of his four-year term. One point, he cut off foreign aids for regional governments. Critics attribute the record surge to Biden's policies, including his decision to end Trump's, quote, remain in Mexico policy that required most asylum seekers from Central America to remain in Mexico while the U.S. court reviewed their claims. So when people came to the border, Trump said, nope, yeah, asylum, no problem. We're going to process your claim, but you got to wait on that side of the border. Guess what happens there? Nobody wants to do that. That is a disincentive from coming to the border. And now you might say, well, those are people that we need in America, and they are claiming asylum, and that's a legal process. And what are we going to do about that? So what do? You change the policy. We don't want them to stay in Mexico anymore. We want to encourage them to come and claim asylum. So when they do get here to the border, we say, come on into the United States. What does that do? It causes a massive surge. We got kids, we've got families, we've got men, a lot of men, young men, some with women, some with children. And we have this whole situation where we don't know if the kids even belong to the people who are bringing them across. The whole thing's a disaster. Because of this, come across the border and wait here. Guess what ends up happening? We can't process people fast enough, and we give them IOUs. Come back to court in a couple weeks. They don't ever come back, and we have an immigration problem that people are upset about, rightfully so. Biden also ended the construction of the border wall, urged Congress to pass legislation that would establish a path to citizenship for most illegal immigrants. Republicans said the legislation and Biden policy changes created new pull factors, countering Harris's emphasis on the root causes. And we're going to see a little bit more about what the root causes are there. The number of U.S.-Mexico border detentions surged to a new 21-year monthly high, more than 178,000 people in April, the most recent month for which statistics are available. Many of the families and unaccompanied children are from the three-country northern triangle of Central America: Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. So when I was thinking through this story, I wanted to really see what they were saying about this in Guatemala. What do the news people say there? And I went there and I found a leading newspaper. They say Guatemala's leading newspaper here is called Prensa Libre. And if you go to this website, you're going to see that they have an article here right on the front page, says Kamala, and I translated this, right? The whole thing is in Spanish, of course, but my Spanish is a little bit rusty. So Kamala Harris is in Guatemala. The chronicle in images of the visit of the vice president. So they met and they talk about the security presence. This was written by Rebecca Javier yesterday. Prensa Libre, which is Guatemala's leading newspaper. So we've got some good pictures from this article that we didn't have in the New York Post. And they say Guatemala is the first country the president has visited, Vice President Harris has visited since she took office. They met with the president, different representatives of what they call civil society, or however that translates. They had snipers, armored vehicles, wide security present. And so we see a picture here, someone saying, no more corruption with impunity here. Different people were present in front of the United States on the occasion. Here we have a different sign. So now we can see sort of what these protests that they were talking about in the New York Post were mentioning. So we've got a bunch of signs here, and we see this big one says, Kamala, they're lying to you. There is corruption. There are lying politicians. There's poor nutrition. There's hate crimes, women killing, exploitation of kids, unemployment, poverty. Guatemala is a narco state, they say. For that reason, there is immigration. So that's why there's immigration. Okay, so he's saying they're lying to you about whatever the root causes are. And Kamala Harris, look at this list, right? Take a look at this list. It says there's corruption, I think that's lying politicians, nutrition problems, exploitation of the kids, women, hate crimes, and all that stuff. Kamala Harris has been talking about, if I recall, things like global warming, right? That wasn't on the list. Climate change, is that on there? Didn't see that anywhere, but that was taking place right in front of the U.S. Embassy. Here are some other signs, the other funny ones that the New York Post was mentioning. You see here, a group of ex-military personnel demonstrated against the visit of Harris. Protesters assured that the vice president came with a, quote, hidden agenda with which she would ask for reforms to the political constitution of the republic. The group also spoke out for the lack of approval of Bill 5664. Okay, so this is the Guatemalan media, right? This is what they are talking about. This is not what America is talking about. It was why I wanted to take a look here and say, well, what are their concerns? Hidden agenda. What could that be? Is she really there for climate change, or is there something else? So we see a couple signs here. This one says, Kamala, mind your own business, right? So they're walking down the street. We have another one. This one here says Trump won back there. Again, their words, cancel this guy. Don't cancel me. Cancel this guy right here. All right. Here we have Guatemala prefers Trump. That's another sign. So, a decent group of people. Not too many, but I say respectable. Going out there, making their voices heard out in Guatemala, protesting Kamala Harris. All right. And so we have another image here. Here is the two of them up on the stage. This is the National Palace of Culture. So we've got Kamala Harris over here, Guatemalan President over here, Giammattei. And here they are speaking. So we've got both of them on stage. Now, in Guatemala, they say they delivered a joint statement highlighting the achievements of the bilateral meeting. Harris informed that his country will create a regional task force with an emphasis on northern Central America to, quote, stop smuggling of migrants and human trafficking. So, okay, so that's what they're reporting Harris had said. Then we go back over to, an American clip. Now, this clip is spreading around Twitter like wildfire. This is Kamala Harris. She's speaking here at the National Palace in Guatemala, and she is telling them, this is from a clip that Reuters put together. And so we're going to probably clip out of it here in about a minute or so. But here is Kamala Harris telling the Guatemalan people, don't come to the border. What? Here she is.
And I believe if you come to our border, you will be turned back.
U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris in Guatemala on Monday said she had robust talks with Guatemalan President Alejandro Giammattei on the need to fight corruption and deter undocumented immigration to the United States from the Central American nation, where she had one resounding message for those considering making the dangerous journey.
Do not come. Do not come.
What?
The vice president, in her first foreign trip, said improving living conditions for Guatemalans at home, fighting corruption, narco-trafficking, and smuggling, and encouraging private investment in Guatemala were key to stemming the flow of migrants to the U.S. border.
The president and I discussed a fundamental belief that most people don't want to leave home. They don't want to leave the place where they grew up, where the language they know is spoken, where their culture that they know is present and has been, in this case, for centuries.
Harris said
Yeah, so why do they come then? Why do they come? It's because they've got some pretty dang strong incentives. Really good ones, like citizenship in the United States, like the borders are open. And you'll notice that her language there was a little bit different than stuff we have heard from her previously. This was something that she posted back in 2017, where she says, say it loud, say it clear. Everyone is welcome here. Like that alliteration, it's pretty good. It says hashtag no ban, no wall, right? So this is obviously her posting in 2017, 4 years ago. So some time ago, but this is just, I think, indicative of the same messaging that we heard all throughout the election, all throughout the campaign when she was running against Donald Trump. All of Donald Trump's policies on the border were racist and xenophobic and rooted in white supremacy and something that was inhumane and causing a crisis by keeping kids in cages, and the litany goes on and on and on. So now suddenly sounds like the tune is changing, because back during the campaign, in order to rebuke Donald Trump, she had to oppose every one of those policies, like, maybe incentivizing or disincentivizing people from coming into the border. Well, now sounds kind of like Trump, right? Don't come to the border. Don't come. What's the media going to say about it? So that was her speech. Now, she met with some other people there. Vice President announced the donation of $40 million to empower indigenous girls. So I guess that's going to, stem migration, I guess. $40 million to indigenous girls. We have, that's going to improve educational and economic opportunities for women, right? Another $48 million is going to be made available for agribusiness. Okay. Again, I don't know where this money goes. I guess that probably most people don't know where this money goes. I'm not against helping people. I love empowering people. Okay. Indigenous girls, great. Empower them too. Empower everybody. I love empowerment. I love education. Love economic opportunities. Love those things too. Love it. But do we just throw $40 million at a country and just what happens with that? Where does that go? Does that go to the government? Is that, what's going on here? And the question is, do we get a return on that investment? Kamala Harris is down there for a problem that she got elected to solve. It's called immigration, right? Whether she was intending to solve this problem or not, that's part of the deal. Joe Biden said, Kamala, you're our gal. You go solve that problem. So that's what happened. So she's got to deal with this. And now she's got to solve the problem. So we got $40 million going to the girls. We got $48 million to agribusiness. Is there any return on investment from her time and that money for America? And I'm sorry to speak in that way, but I mean, can't we also be humanitarian and also do well for the country, get some ROI out of that money? I don't see what the problem is with that. We can't. I think you can do well financially and use your resources intelligently while doing good. They don't have to be opposed to one another. Why don't we say, okay, agribusiness, does the U.S., we're going to be $48 million for agribusiness. All right. Is the U.S. going to be engaging in some, are we going to receive anything from that? Are we going to say, we're going to give you $48 million and we expect you to use that and invest that to build these factories to process your agriculture, and we're going to buy that on the open market at a 20% reduction until 10 years until we recoup that $48 million back. And we think that's a fair deal and a good investment. It helps your economy, gives you a bunch of good jobs. U.S. gets some cheap grain or whatever they're growing down there. And it's a nice little symbiotic relationship. How about that? Or do we just throw $40 million at something and there's no accountability for where that goes or what happens with that? Does it solve the immigration crisis in any way, shape, or form? I don't know. I'm asking. I'm just asking. I don't know. We have some other stories here from, we have Juan Gonzalez. So he's the director down there from the United States Security Council. Gave more agreements. He says that they spoke about the issue of migration and the creation of legal routes, they have in quotes. Gonzalez also spoke about the creation of an anti-corruption force, which will allow investigating and prosecuting corruption cases that have a link to the United States, Guatemala, in the region in general. VP of President, this is the last image that they had in their article. She left. She met with all these people. They're going to talk about migration, corruption, employment. She met with leaders from Guatemala, local entrepreneurs. She said, quote, "The United States will continue to raise concerns about the threats to the independence of the judiciary, the press, and civil society in Guatemala and neighboring nations around the world," Harris said. So she continues up to Mexico, which is actually a place that is on the United States border. So we'll see what comes out of that, if anything. Now, this trip has largely been seen as a flop, rightfully so, because she said, don't come. Nobody was expecting that. If you are a liberal or a Democrat, you're saying, what? What are you talking about? We just heard you say for the last part of the election and for the months, weeks, and years leading up to that, that we want the humanitarian and sympathetic, and we're going to help all these people, and Trump's a racist, and we're the opposite of that. So now you're saying don't come? Well, she's trying to do some cleanup and not make it worse. Unfortunately, she failed at that because she might be the worst politician who is elected today. She went over on to Lester Holt's show, and here's a quick quote from the show before we play the clip. Here's what was said. Nathan Brand over on Twitter posted this and said, "What? Kamala Harris is not serious about addressing the border crisis that their policies created." He gives us a little bit of a transcript here from the Lester Holt show over on NBC. So Harris says, we've been to the border. Holt says, you haven't been to the border. Harris says, well, and I haven't been to Europe. I don't understand the point there, Lester. She kind of cackles and does that little Kamala, thing that she does. Let's watch this quickly.
Okay. Do you have any plans to visit the border?
At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making. Okay.
Do you have?
Yikes. That's really bad. That's just rough. You can see when her brain just sort of, when it just short circuits there, it goes, we've been to the border. We've been to the border. We've been to the border. He says, but Kamala, you haven't been to the border though, have you? And she goes, You would imagine, folks, if you're the vice president of this country, you've got a little bit more preparation for this. You know that the Republicans, the GOP, whether you think this is a fair criticism or not, and I don't, I understand the need as a leader to go down to the border and make your presence known and say, I'm here, we're going to do this stuff, right? But I also recognize that the United States doesn't need the vice president or the president to show up physically everywhere, right, in order to run the country. I think it's a fun sort of jab for the Republicans to keep needling her about this. Hey, why don't you go to the border? And now she's kind of at this point where she like kind of can't go to the border now, because if she goes to the border, then she's going to be sort of acquiescing to the Republicans' demands, and that's going to look weak. But then the media is kind of calling her out here. Hey, you kind of skipped over the border. You went to Guatemala. You going to go down there at all? I mean, she's going to Mexico. Is she going to go visit the border from the Mexican side or not? What's going on? So, she really can't kind of win at this point in time because she's backed herself into a corner because they have dumb policies that don't work, that their policies are the problem. If they just flipped their policies and said, you're right, this is causing a humanitarian crisis, we got to start re-implementing some more strict, stringent border controls, maybe we'll actually stem the flow of migrants who want to come into this country, and that will solve more of a humanitarian problem. I mean, they're trying to be humanitarians while creating a humanitarian crisis, and they don't even see it. It's about a political win. It's not about actually helping people. If they wanted to actually help people, there are many ways to do this. Both parties could do that, but I think they're both very interested in making sure that there isn't any actual progress on this issue. Both parties benefit from a porous border, unfortunately. Now, and unfortunately for the people as well. It's just a sad thing that we're doing. And this is of our own making. I say this all the time. Coronavirus, COVID, all of that was sort of, whoa, what is this thing? It's beyond our comprehension and control, but this is our border. We can just pass some legislation, send some more bodies down there, fund some more people, right? Solve the issue. Same thing with the criminal justice stuff. These feel like self-inflicted issues that are then doubled down upon because of politics, especially in this case. All right, so now we have the bad Lester Holt interview. Oh, I've been to the border. No, you haven't. Well, I haven't been to Europe either there, Lester. Okay, so what the hell's your point, right? Are you going to go to, next question, are you going to go to Europe? Okay, so then the White House press room. Now we got Jen Psaki here trying to clean that up.
What the vice president was simply conveying is that there's more work to be done, that we don't have these systems in place yet. It's still a dangerous journey, as we've said many times from here and from many forums before. And we need more time to get the work done to ensure that asylum processing is where it should be.
All right, so not much there. Now, some people who are leaders in the Democratic Party who kind of are running the show now are upset about this. Let's take a look over here. We have AOC, of course, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She posted this earlier, about 23 hours ago. Says, this is disappointing to see, responding to Kamala. Says, first, seeking asylum at any border is 100% legal method of arrival, right? And okay, so that's fine. Trump said wait across the border. They said wait over here in the border, and we see what the repercussions are. So second, she says, the U.S. spent decades contributing to regime change and destabilization in Latin America. We can't help set someone's house on fire and then blame them for fleeing. All right, so you see where that's going. So the United States caused all the havoc that's existing, I guess, maybe everywhere in the world, or maybe just in Guatemala. I don't know. But she finishes this up. She says, it would be helpful if the U.S. would finally acknowledge its contributions to destabilization and regime change in the region. Doing so can help us change U.S. foreign policy, trade policy, climate policy, carceral policy, border policy, mass displacement, migration, all these other policies. So she's not happy about it. Now, my question is she going to go back down to the border with her white outfit and then hang from the chain link fences crying like a spectacle? She going to do that again? Don't know. We'll see. We have questions now. We got some questions that are coming in hot from watchingthewatchers.locals.com, which is our community where we do other things other than just put content out. We post other things to do, like joining a monthly meetup, a law enforcement interaction training, and we ask questions from there. So our first one coming over is Jeremy Matrida. Says, I wonder if this trip has set a precedent for all future trips for this administration. Says people will publicly say what they believe when they are not part of the system that silences people. No matter what country you live in, everyone has a fundamental right to freedom of speech when it pertains to countries other than your own. Yeah, it's a good, Jeremy, it's a good point. I think that freedom of speech is sort of it's a human right. I think it's a fundamental guarantee that is deeper than just paper, right? I think it's sort of inherent to your existence. It's your ability to express yourself and communicate yourself. I think if you take that away from somebody, you are taking away part of what makes them human. And so I think it's a human right, really. And I think it's one of the most important rights ever. That's why it's the First Amendment. The founders agreed with that. You can't really talk about it. You can't take action on anything else if you can't talk about it. And so if you burden speech, you burden everything else that comes as a result of speech, which happens to be everything. So it's a very important right, very important concept, and I appreciate you sharing that. We've got Joe Snow in the house, says, she did not get elected. I guess I guess Joe Snow agrees with the Guatemalans down there. So thanks, Joe. We have Cove Queen. Oh, we got the Cove Queen in the house. Says 043 says, throwing money at the wrong issues following a pathetic excuse for a plea to remain in Guatemala. This is starting to seem more like a punked reboot every day. Forget where's Hunter. Where's Ashton is the real question. I know, like our foreign policy is kind of comical, except that if it weren't so sad. And, typically these types of trips, there's kind of something that comes out of it, right? Like an agreement or some sort of action item takeaway. I just read from you what the president of Guatemala said, well, we're on different sides of the coin on this issue. So, U.S. throws some money down there. She makes a big statement that says, don't come. All right. So I guess all of the people who are on their way are just going to go, oh, did you hear? Kamala Harris said, don't come. Oh, all right. Pack up, kids. We're going home. Kamala said, don't come. Right. The question is, are there going to be any policy changes? Because the policies lead to the incentives. It's not her inconsequential blather that moves the needle on it. It's the decisions that they make that trickle down, that get implemented. People listen to those things. So they're still going to come. Not going to change anything. Next up, we have Anonymousies in the house says, so is VP Harris creating jobs in Guatemala by encouraging U.S. companies to move there? Is this their job creation plan? And does it then exploit the poor by giving them slave labor wages? Is anyone else finding this outrageous? Yeah, I actually do, right? I find it condescending to them that they need the United States to come in and fix their problems. I find it condescending that they might say, if that is what they're talking about, we're going to send a bunch of jobs that Americans don't want over there, and we're going to sort of mandate as part of our government that we're going to slop all of this onto you. Right? Look, if there's private investment and there's private agreements that are happening there, that's a different story. But that's not what Kamala Harris is there doing. She's an ambassador of the government. Right? She's the vice president, somebody who has been delegated the responsibility of solving this issue. So going around and throwing $100 million at a problem doesn't do anything as far as I can tell. Is it going to stall? Is it going to stop anything? Did the Guatemalan president say, hey, thanks for your $88 million of investment. We're going to send our National Guard to our border and we're going to start doing something about this. Did that happen? Is Guatemala going to do anything here? Or are we just going to sort of rely on Kamala's words, don't come, and expect that to be meaningful? Great questions. All of those came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And before we jump into the next segment, quick reminder, we've got some very great links to other channels down below. Got a crypto channel, have a channel where I do recorded videos, did a very long deep dive on COVID you should check out. And then we have our law firm channel where we talk about Arizona cases, Arizona law, and some other information about dealing with law enforcement and police. So if any of those sound appetizing to you, please feel free to follow the links below. And of course, if you need any legal services in the state of Arizona that are related to a crime, definitely contact us. We offer free case evaluations and would love the opportunity to help.